I really didn't want to have to make this video, but why don't we just get together and have a little chat? There's a pattern that I've been noticing on how certain political parties have been formulating a design to assume power. A lot of this comes from old communist and Marxist ideas and strategies of creating a marginalized group and using that victimhood and that victim mentality to claim dominance. And this is just a theory of mine. It may not be accurate, but this is just something that I've been thinking about. And if you think I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments, and please let me know why you think I'm wrong. I am always up for debate, healthy debate. When you have a marginal group being a group that is a small number of people that share the same characteristics and the same traits. And I'm going to remain very vague here and very general so that I'm not singling in on any one particular issue, because this is played across the entire political spectrum, and this has been done throughout humanity. And this is just a theory of mine that is developed based off of multiple theories and ideas of numerous people that I've read, that I've listened to, that I think may have some weight. And if you think it doesn't, again, please comment below. I'd like to understand where I may be missing something, and I may not be thinking of everything, but this is just a spur of the moment. If you have a marginal group and you would like to assume power, if you can get the majority behind the marginal group, then you technically have majority power, because you have now weaponized the majority in the name of the minority. Just fix my camera a little bit there, sorry. So how do you weaponize the majority in favor of the minority to use against another group? You need to infiltrate thought leaders, you need to infiltrate media, you need to infiltrate entertainment. And let's say you pick a specific group that's marginal, and you make that marginal group marginalized. So you say that the only reason why this group is marginal is because they have been marginalized by the majority. So the minority, the marginal group has been marginalized by the majority. And you claim victimhood status at that point. You say that they haven't done this to themselves, and this is not just a circumstance that could exist in the natural world without any external influence, that this was done by a majority against a minority. Now this is popular because you have seen this happen countless times throughout history, where yes, majorities have oppressed minorities in a way. I'm not going into any specifics, but I think you can understand what I'm saying here with formulative statistics and data and facts. You can see that throughout history, based off of what many have written about, that it becomes very dangerous when a majority assumes absolute power, whereas the minority group, and I'm talking about thought and ideas, I'm not talking about race or gender or sex or any of that. I'm strictly talking about minority versus majority in terms of political ideas and thought and beliefs, could be religion as well. That is the constant. So, okay, you have a marginal group that you claim is marginalized by the majority. And the only reason why you say that they've been marginalized by the majority is because they're marginal. So it's almost this like vicious circle, right? It's this circular argument of we are only marginal because we've been marginalized. And what that does to that marginal group is that now you've elevated victimhood status, and good things and bad things can come out of it. So take the example of endangered species. If you have a species that is endangered somewhere in the world, you have to protect that species at all costs. And there are circumstances that led to that species becoming endangered that was out of their control. So there is nothing that they could have done to become endangered. They just are endangered now. So humans, need to step in to save the species from being endangered. Well, how do they do that? They put them under their wing. They protect them from their enemies and predators, whether if it's a predator or prey species. Or you supply them with the essence of life so that they can continue to live and reproduce and step out of that endangered species realm, which has happened. People have done that, and it's we can debate on whether that's good or bad, and whether the you get back to the cause of that species becoming endangered. And that's something you need to center on, because you may say, yes, this species is endangered, but why? Because it's not always the same thing, right? There's plenty of reasons why certain species move into that endangered species classification. And then there are many additional things that could lead them out of it. But a lot of that has to be focused on the root cause analysis of why that species moved into the endangered species category. But okay, you have this marginal group who can be classified as endangered because they're so small and they can't fend for themselves. So with America being America, we try to protect the minorities. We try to say that we feel that they should receive the same representation, which Electoral College, very big proponent of minority ideas and thoughts, and people who share those ideas and thoughts, and people who live in those smaller communities who don't get shouted down by larger communities, larger states with larger population, cities, different different geography throughout the United States. Some people may have different needs than others. So it's one of the reasons why the Electoral College is so important, because it does protect minority voices when it comes to state-by-state representation in at the federal level. Okay, it seems acceptable so far, right? You've gotten to the point where you've said we've identified that this is a marginal group and we need to protect them. But then you flip it and say that they've been marginalized. Have they? That's the question. And I think that's what a lot of people need to get down to. Have they been marginalized in order to become marginal? Like, if they weren't marginalized, would they still be marginal? That's the big question. And the answer seemingly always nowadays is yes, they are marginalized. And that's why they are considered a marginal group. Not because it may just be an unpopular opinion. Well, it could go one way or the other, right? And not because that way of life is not necessarily popular with the majority of people, but no, because they've been purposely marginalized, they've been oppressed. So we feel sympathy for the oppressed, right? Everybody wants to have the same amount of rights and the same amount of freedoms, and that's what the nation is founded upon. Equal rights for all, regardless of who you are, and you are equally subject to the law, no matter who you are or where you are in life. So those are the two things. You have the same amount of rights, and you are equal under the law. Okay, the protection and prosecution. Now we've reached the point where we say, great, now we have this marginalized group here. Well, they seem to be a group that has a certain way of life that a decent amount of people don't really agree with. Those people are the oppressors. And how are we going to get this marginalized group out of the marginal group category? Well, what do you do with endangered species? You protect them. You place them under your wing, and you fend off and fight the predators and hunger. You keep them well fed, well nourished, and protected. So, in essence, you now say that this group here is untouchable. They are untouchable, and there's nothing you can say or do. And in no way, at any point, ever, can you or should you criticize or challenge this group, because they've been criticized and challenged enough. It's time to allow them to elevate their voices to broadcast to everyone, so that everyone can hear their story. Now, does that sound acceptable? Think about that for a moment. We have a group of people who may not have gotten the same opportunities as others. Let's just say that that actually is the case. I think it is acceptable to say they should be able to speak at the same level and in the same platforms as those who currently have access to those levels of speak and platform and visibility in a political and idealistic sense. But there's a point where we reach a turning. And that turning occurs when you say that you cannot criticize and you cannot challenge. No one should be protected from criticism or challenge, be it fair. And it must be fair. If it is fair criticism and fair challenge, they should have to defend themselves fairly. If they have a certain idea, that idea should be challenged fairly. But what seems to be happening is everything is off limits. All holds are barred. And why? You're taking a group that you claim has been marginalized by the majority with no evidence of such, and using the majority of the mediums, which is the mainstream corporate media, the corporate legacy media, Hollywood, politicians, education, to then force feed those ideas to the rest of the idealistic society. So you're taking. So you're saying this is their way of life, and everyone has to know about it. Not everyone should know. It's not like they're gonna print out a piece of paper and put it up at a library, and you walk by it and you look at it if you want, and if you're interested, you can call a number and sit in on some sessions to learn more. Or it's like an elective class at college. You take a class if you'd like to take the class so you can learn more about that subject. No. It is mandatory that you accept this class, because in their world you have never accepted this class. Regardless if you even have known about this class, that means that you haven't accepted it and that you haven't shown it the love that it deserves. So just because you were passive, that means you are aggressive towards you are aggressively backing the marginalization of that group, because you are not aggressively backing the group to remove them from that marginalization that they have found themselves in. So you create a protected class, and now you allow them to do whatever they would like and say whatever they would like. Now, let's talk about that a little bit more, because there's two things about that that are very important. Number one, to do things and say things that you would like. I am a free speech proponent and an absolutist. I think, yes, there are absolutely speech that should be not only protected, but also there should be speech that there are laws written to prevent this speech, like calling for violence, yelling fire in a crowded theater, But there are already laws that exist against certain types of speech that should not be allowed throughout society. But what I'm saying is people should be able to freely express their ideas, regardless of how much you may disagree with them. I would give my life for someone to be able to speak an idea that I completely disagree with. But they should be able to say those things, because then I, in turn, am allowed to say my ideas in a public forum, in a respectful manner. However, okay, so that's saying things, right? And thinking things and doing things. But you should be allowed to do that on your own time. You should be able to go home and do whatever things you want to do at home. You'd be able to practice whatever religion you want to practice, believe you whatever you want to believe, and speak about ideas that you think, that you hold to be true to yourself. That is completely acceptable. This is where the turn happens here. The second turn is you are now allowing these individuals to force their ideas on others that may disagree. And you do that because your claim is that they have been oppressed because of you, because of your action and inaction. So now you have to be oppressed by them, and you have to be forced to watch and listen and learn and accept. It's one thing to understand, but it's another to have to accept those ideas in your life. You should, by all means, if you were in a debate with someone about an idea, politically, or philosophically, religious, theological, whatever, any idea, you should understand, even if it's the other side. You should understand that other side's idea, and then you can formulate your opinion about that idea. You may agree on some things and disagree on others, but that is the point of free discussions. That, yes, try to understand the other side. Try to see where they're coming from. But that doesn't mean you should have to accept their opinions and their ideas and their ways of life. You can disagree with it, and that is absolutely within your right as an individual to disagree with their way of life. But as soon as you are told and forced to accept their way of life, now they have in turn become the oppressors. They have in turn become the fascists, because what they're saying to you is our idea is superior, and regardless of what you think, you have to accept our ideas ad nauseum. You have to hear us, and you have to obey us, and you have to respect us. I'm okay with hearing and respecting, but obeying? It's a little oppressive, don't you think? Obeying. We have to now bow down to certain people because of their marginalization that they've been suffering from. Still with no sufficient tactile evidence of this marginalization. And by all means, if there is some, please explain. I would love to understand that more, especially if it's systemic. Okay, so the first turn is you've protected a group where you cannot criticize or say anything or challenge their ideas and their ways of life. Okay. Number two, the turn is they're allowed to say and do whatever they like. Great. But the turn there is they force their ideas upon you. And you take the majority, thought leaders, and the peddlers of media who are on their side, and they also peddle and force feed those ideas down your throat, whether you like it or not, because guess what? Your action or inaction to their marginalization is on you, so you deserve to be oppressed and force-fed their ideas and accept their ideas. And if you do not, you are a bigot. And why? Because they are marginalized and they've never had the opportunity to speak out. And maybe their way of life shouldn't be marginal because they were marginalized not by natural law, but by external forces from society that have forced them to be marginal. And maybe if we forced that marginal thought on others, they wouldn't be marginal anymore. But how exactly are they forcing that marginal thought on others? The majority. How are they doing this? Through entertainment, through the corporate legacy media, through politicians, through legislation, and through education. And this is the one that I think a lot of people have a problem with. There is a lot of gender and queer studies going around right now in schools. And this is a very uncomfortable topic, and why I'm not going to touch on it too much. But you see how those types of things are forced on others. Now, I don't have a problem with people wanting to live their own lives, unobstructed by others. But if you are going to say that you want to live an unobstructed life, then so should I. I should be able to live I should be able to live a life as unobstructed from external forces as you. And that is fair, and that is America. You should be able to practice and do what you feel is right, as long as I do not have to participate against my will in order for you to do something. That is not a right. That is a privilege that must be afforded to you by your peers. And you cannot demand others to bow down to your needs without gaining mutual respect. And if you cannot gain mutual respect from your peers, but you continuously demand more and more, you are going to lose that respect that maybe some have had for you. But then what does that become? Now that you've lost the respect, more people are probably going to challenge you. And who steps in? Corporate legacy media, entertainment, and politicians, who are going to step in and are going to make you, whether you like it or not, they're going to make you accept those ideas. Because until everyone, this is where it gets very strange for me, because now I'm starting to realize it's not that I was starting to realize this. I knew sort of from the beginning, but I wanted to be careful and I wanted to be cautious about how I spoke about this, but I'm beyond that at this point. You have gotten to the point where you say, with the most unrealistic terms, that every single human on the planet has to accept your way of life. Do you really think that everyone in the world would accept my way of life? I'm sure there's plenty of people who would oppose many things that I do. I like golfing. There's a lot of people out there who don't like golf. Do they need to play golf every day just because I play golf? No. I like metal. I love listening to death metal, prog, whatever. I also listen to bluegrass, country, chill hop. Do other people have to listen to that music just because I do? No. They don't have to do anything that I do. They don't have to believe in things that I believe in. They don't have to live their lives the way I live my life because I live my life that way. No, that is not how you behave as a human being in society. You understand their way of life. You can say, listen, I understand that you like metal, I just don't. And I can kind of see the appeal. Some people like it. It's very high energy. But I don't like it, and I don't need to listen to it. What am I going to do? Sit them down and tie them to a chair and force them to listen to metal until they like it? Do you think that forcing people to like something is going to make them like it? Sitting down, tying a kid down in a high chair and forcing them to eat asparagus or broccoli or greens, you think that's going to make them like it if you force it upon them? No. Back in the civil rights movement, yes, you had people who did not agree that certain people's way of life should be accepted throughout. But it was not forced upon them. They showed them and allowed them to understand in a passive way that this is not the way to live in society. Can you see that these are people? So let's accept them. Let us accept someone for who they are in here and not what they are here. Because in here matters more than here. I say all this because I see what's happening. And there are certain ideas and certain ways of life that are being forced upon certain people, mostly children under the age of 13. Started with older kids, but now it's being fed to children very, very young. And these ideas are destabilizing. These ideas are not normal, and there's a reason why these ideas are not normal, because they are not sustainable. These ideas are not normal because they're not constructive to a positive way of life. And again, my thought, you can live your life however you want. It is your responsibility for how you live your life. But don't ever tell me that I have to live my life the way you do because that's the way you live your life. And I don't have to sit there and I don't have to sit there and accept every aspect of your life just because that's the way you live your life. I can understand it on my own terms if I want to understand. But not only is it your responsibility to live your life the way that you want to, but it's also my responsibility to take it upon myself to understand your way of life. And if I do so, I may be more enlightened, understanding cultures around the world. But if I don't, then maybe I am a closed-minded man. But it is my responsibility as an individual to make that decision on my own, and it is your responsibility as an individual to live your life the way that you seem most fit for success and happiness and meaning. So the second it becomes those two turns, the second we make those two turns, that's when things get bad. That's when things get volatile, and that's when people get angry. Because when you make those two turns and direct them towards children, for conversion, take that as you will, but that's my spiel. So be careful when you hear folks talking about a marginalized group. Were they marginalized? And how were they marginalized? Or are they just a marginal group? Are they just a minority? And if they're just a minority, what are the reasons behind that? Is it natural or is it unnatural? Is it man-made or not? Then continue down that road. But never, and I mean never, in this society, in any society, should anyone have some other way of life forced upon them. I don't care if people come at me and say, well, that's what we did overseas when we tried to force democracy on, societies that didn't want it. I'm on board there, bud. I'm on board. I agree. Oh, you're just a hypocrite because you believe in America, but you don't believe that their ideas may not be ideal for other parts of the world. Other than the fact that Western civilization has pulled over 60% of the world out of absolute poverty in less than 40 years. But yeah, sure, we can get into that at some other time. So in the end, understand. But you don't need to adopt those ideas. You don't need to accept those ideas. You can understand them, but you can also disagree with them. I am totally free to say that. And I'm totally free to live my life like that. I'm not going to go out of my way to criticize someone in an uncivilized fashion. But if someone comes at me and challenges me, then absolutely I will come back. So, anyway, this went a lot longer than I thought it would. But please let me know if you disagree. I would love to hear it. I would love to understand more about why you think the way that you do. If you put a comment here, please explain to me why you think the way you do about your idea that is challenging my idea. And I'll be very clear again. My idea is, I don't believe that every marginal group has been marginalized. That's number one. Number two, I don't believe that the best way to make marginal ideas and marginal ways of life acceptable is to force it upon people against their will and accuse them of something that they haven't done, accusing them of oppression and inaction when they haven't even realized what this group is, what they represent, what their ideas are, what their way of life is, and they've lived their life completely separate and unaware. So, I also, again, to be clear, do not believe that just because a group is protected, and if there is a group that needs to be protected, then protect that group. But there's no need to then take the next step and force that group's ideology or way of life upon other people against their will. There's no need to force everyone in the world to accept it. Just understand that there are going to be people out there that will not accept your way of life and that will not accept your idea, regardless of how many times you explain it to them. That's the beauty about being human, is that not everyone is going to agree. Not everyone is going to accept who you are or what you believe in. But if they understand it, then that is fine. But it is only up to them, and it is their responsibility to then take the extra step to understand those ideas. But they should have the freedom to not have to understand those ideas. That's all I have to say. Anyway, signing off now. Have a great day.